My name is João, and I've been a truck driver for almost 20 years. I've been through a lot on these Brazilian roads, but there's one story that happened to me a few years ago that I'll never forget. It was on an October night during a heavy cargo trip. I was driving from the interior of Minas Gerais to the coast of Santa Catarina. The route was known for being full of winding roads through the mountains, but I was ready for the long journey. What I wasn't ready for was what would happen that night. The trip started off fine, but as I got closer to the Serra do Corvo Branco, in Santa Catarina, the weather started to change. The sky darkened quickly, and soon a heavy rain began to fall. To make things worse, a dense fog covered the road. I turned on the fog lights and slowed down, as the curves were sharp and treacherous. The windshield wiper couldn't keep up with the downpour, and the tall trees lining the road added to the sense of isolation. There was no turning back, I had to keep going. I remembered a story I had heard from other truckers about this mountain pass. They said the road was dangerous, especially on nights like this, and spoke of strange accidents that had happened there. I always thought it was just tales to scare newcomers, but that night, my opinion would change forever. It was already past midnight when I started descending the steepest part of the mountain. The truck was heavy, and every curve required all my attention. I could barely see ahead because of the fog. Suddenly, in the distance, on the shoulder of the sharpest curve, I saw someone. A woman. She was completely drenched, dressed in white, standing there in the middle of nowhere. She was staring directly at me. My heart nearly stopped. I slowed down even more, trying to understand what was happening. My first instinct was fear, of course, but then I thought she must need help. The rain was relentless, and this was no place for anyone to be alone. I decided to stop the truck a little further ahead, close to where she was, and got out to see if she needed assistance. But, to my surprise, when I reached the spot where I had seen the woman, there was no one there. The road was deserted. Only the sound of rain and the wind remained. I stood there for a few seconds, trying to process what had just happened. Did I imagine it? I wondered. But I knew what I saw. I was sure she had been there. I went back to the truck, feeling uneasy, as if something was watching me. I started the engine and continued driving, but the image of that woman wouldn't leave my mind. As I drove further, the feeling that I wasn't alone in the cabin grew stronger. The air felt heavier. I tried turning on the radio to distract myself, but nothing seemed to ease the discomfort. That's when I heard a strange sound, almost imperceptible, coming from the back seat. Like a whisper. My name. A murmur. João. I quickly turned my head, but I saw nothing. I looked in the rearview mirror, and the cabin was empty. My heart was racing. I tried convincing myself it was just my imagination. Maybe it was the fatigue, the rain, the road. But the whisper continued. And it seemed to get louder. João. João. With every mile I drove, the air inside the cabin felt heavier, and fear took over me. Then the worst happened. In a moment of panic, I glanced at the passenger seat, and there she was. The woman in white. Soaked. Her eyes fixed on me. She didn't say a word, but her expression was one of despair, as if she was trying to warn me of something. My reaction was to scream and jerk the steering wheel sharply. The truck skidded on the wet road, and I almost drove off the road. When I regained control of the truck, I looked again, and she was gone. I didn't know what to do. I pulled over on the shoulder, my hands trembling, my body cold with fear. I was alone, in the middle of a deserted and rainy road, with the unsettling feeling that something supernatural had just happened. I took a deep breath and tried to calm down. I thought about calling someone, telling them what was happening, but what excuse would I give? "Hey, I'm seeing ghosts on the road." No one would believe me. I started the truck again and kept driving, praying that it had just been a scare. But what happened next was even worse. The presence of that woman seemed to linger with me, even though I couldn't see her anymore. The whispers grew louder. The air inside the cabin felt suffocating. I wanted to speed up and get off that road as fast as I could, but the fog and rain kept me from going too fast. After a few more hours of tension, I saw the lights of a roadside diner. Finally, a place where I could stop and try to make sense of what was happening. When I parked the truck, I practically jumped out of the cabin, my heart still racing. I walked into the diner, and the smell of fresh coffee calmed me down a bit. The place was full of truck drivers, like these places always are at night. I sat down in a corner and ordered a strong coffee. I was still trying to process everything when a group of truckers noticed how shaken I was. One of them, an older man with a gray beard, came over and asked, "You okay, buddy? You look like you've seen a ghost." I smiled nervously, but deep down, I knew that was exactly what had happened. I decided to tell him what I had seen. I spoke about the woman in white, the whispers, and how I had nearly lost control of the truck. To my surprise, no one laughed or called me crazy. The gray-bearded man grew serious and said, "You're not the first one to see that woman. I've heard this story before." Another trucker, a younger guy, joined in and added, "They say she's the spirit of a woman who died in an accident on that mountain pass years ago. The locals call her the Lady of the Curve." The silence around the table was unnerving. "What do I do?" I asked, fearing the answer. "Pray, my friend," the older man said. "Pray and keep calm. And try to avoid that road at night. People who see that woman usually don't fare well afterward." I stayed at the diner for a while longer, trying to absorb everything they had told me. Despite the lingering fear, I felt a little calmer being around other truckers. But I knew I couldn't stay there forever. I got back in the truck with their advice in mind and a prayer on my lips. I continued driving, more alert than ever, hoping that the woman in white wouldn't appear again. Thankfully, I managed to reach my destination without any further incidents. But that night has never left my memory. Since then, I avoid driving on that road at night, and every time I pass a sharp curve, I say a prayer. Because one thing I've learned, these roads have their secrets, and sometimes, it's best to respect the stories you hear out there.